Here and welcome back to GeoMapApp Tours. This time we're going to be looking at continental margins, in particular passive continental margins. Passive continental margins are those submerged edges of continents that are not along an active plate boundary. A good example of a passive continental margin is that of eastern North America. So here we see the east coast of the United States. You see Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Long Island, New York, and New Jersey. And we see this very shallow water in this broad region. This is known as the Continental Shelf. This is the submerged surface or top of the edge of the North American continent. And then you can see this line right here where the edge of the continent exists, and then you see the side of the continent, the steeper sloped side. This is called the Continental Slope. And what separates the shelf from the slope, this transition, is called the shelf break, which you can see this line right along here. And piled up on the slope on the side are these sediments. And so you can see this more gradual descent down to deeper depths. This is called the Continental Rise. So this is sediment accumulating on the edge of the continental margin. Okay, so from the coastline to the end of the Continental Rise marks the what is known as the continental margin. So let's look at a profile of the elevation of a continental margin. Okay, so here it looks like to be Connecticut into southwestern Rhode Island. So it's above sea level. If you know, up here you can see the elevation. Positive means above sea level, negative means below sea level. And if you'll look up on the profile line, the black circle with the red dot indicates where along the profile my cursor is in this elevation profile. And the y-axis here is an elevation, meters, or 0 is sea level, so positive is above sea level, negative is below sea level, and the x-axis is distance in kilometers along the profile line. So starting at the top left, we're above sea level, about 150 meters above sea level. And as we come to the coast, we are now beneath sea level. We are at the beginning of the continental shelf. In this very broad submerged region, this edge of the continent is this continental shelf. See, the water is not that deep. Let's here we're at negative 77 meters. Now here we're at negative 100 meters. It might sound like a lot, but 100 meters is just a little bit more than the length of a football field. So even though it seems like we're pretty far offshore, the water is not that deep because we're still above the North American continent. See this little ditch here that we're just catching this submarine canyon right there that's been carved by a turbidity current, which we'll discuss in a second. But then right here is the edge of the shelf. And begins what's known as the Continental Slope. So that is literally the edge or the side of the North American continent. And what separates the shelf from the Continental Slope is what's called the shelf break. So that's that line that indicates the edge of the shelf and beginning of the slope. And then you can see this steep slope right here is replaced by a more gradual slope. And that is because these are sediments piled up along the edge of the continent. And those piling of sediments causes this more gradual sloping down to the abyssal plain, which we can see is much deeper. Now we're at 5,000 some meters deep. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this GeoMapApp tour of passive continental margins. I look forward to seeing you next time.